What if the most important question after the recent strikes is not what was destroyed, but what may still remain? Behind the satellite imagery, behind the official statements from Washington, Tehran, and Jerusalem, one issue continues to dominate strategic conversations: the condition and location of Iran's enriched uranium stockpile. Reports indicate that coordinated strikes targeted several nuclear-related facilities inside Iran. Infrastructure was reportedly damaged. Satellite images appear to show visible structural destruction at certain sites long associated with enrichment activity. But there is a critical distinction here. Damaging facilities is not the same as eliminating nuclear material. And as of now, there is no independent public confirmation that Iran's entire enriched uranium stockpile has been destroyed. That uncertainty matters, because in modern strategic calculations, material capability often outweighs infrastructure damage. Nuclear infrastructure can be rebuilt. Scientific expertise cannot simply be erased. And enriched uranium, once produced, does not disappear automatically with structural damage to a building. This is why intelligence assessments are now focused less on visible destruction and more on verification. What survived? What was moved? What remains operational? These questions are shaping internal discussions inside multiple governments. From Washington's perspective, the strikes appear to have served multiple strategic objectives. One message was directed toward Iran: escalation carries consequences. Another message was intended for regional allies concerned about Iran's nuclear trajectory. And at a broader level, the operation signals continued U.S. willingness to project military capability in support of its regional security commitments. But military operations are rarely conducted solely for immediate tactical destruction. They are also designed to alter timelines, complicate adversary planning, and introduce uncertainty into strategic calculations. Some analysts believe the objective may not have been total elimination, but delay. Delay can change diplomatic leverage. Delay can alter negotiation dynamics. Delay can buy time. However, delay carries risk. History shows that military pressure does not always produce compromise. In some cases, it reinforces hardline positions. In others, it accelerates programs rather than slowing them. This is where uncertainty becomes especially sensitive. If portions of enriched uranium survived, and if their location remains undisclosed, ambiguity itself becomes a strategic tool. Iran may choose not to clarify. Ambiguity preserves deterrence. Ambiguity complicates adversary planning. Ambiguity can prevent opponents from declaring definitive victory. But ambiguity can also increase miscalculation risk. The implications extend beyond Iran and Israel. Energy markets are watching closely. The Gulf region remains central to global oil flows. Even limited instability can influence prices, investor confidence, and broader economic conditions. And in an already fragile global economic environment, additional uncertainty can amplify volatility. This is why governments beyond the immediate parties are monitoring developments carefully. European states, China, Russia, all have strategic interests tied to stability in the region. For China, stable energy supply is critical. For European governments, regional escalation could create economic and security ripple effects. For Russia, instability may present both risks and strategic considerations. Yet perhaps the most important battlefield now is not physical. It is informational. Intelligence agencies across multiple countries are now working to assess: has uranium been relocated? Was it dispersed prior to the strikes? Were underground facilities unaffected? Locating and verifying nuclear material inside hardened infrastructure is extraordinarily difficult. Even sophisticated military operations do not automatically produce full visibility. This means the next phase of the situation may be less about visible military activity and more about intelligence gathering, surveillance, and strategic signaling. And this distinction is critical. If decision-makers believe significant material survived, pressure for further action could grow. If assessments indicate meaningful disruption, diplomatic channels may strengthen. Perception, sometimes as much as physical reality, drives policy response. Clear outcomes can stabilize a crisis. Unclear outcomes can prolong it. Right now, clarity remains limited. The strikes may have altered infrastructure, but the strategic equation now depends on what cannot yet be publicly confirmed. If uncertainty is now the defining feature of this crisis, then intelligence becomes the central driver of what happens next. Governments do not make strategic decisions based solely on public statements or satellite images released to media outlets. They rely on classified assessments, signals intelligence, surveillance data, cyber monitoring, human sources, and technical analysis. But intelligence has limits. Underground facilities are difficult to assess remotely. Hardened infrastructure complicates detection. Dispersed material reduces visibility. And deliberate ambiguity can distort outside interpretation. That means policymakers may be operating under incomplete information, even at the highest levels. And incomplete information increases risk. If one government believes the strikes successfully neutralized significant nuclear capacity, it may pursue diplomatic stabilization. If another government believes substantial capability remains intact, pressure for further disruption could grow. If assessments differ between allies, coordination becomes more complicated. Strategic misalignment does not require hostility. It only requires different interpretations of the same data. And in nuclear-related crises, perception can move policy faster than confirmation. From a U.S. policy standpoint, the challenge now is balancing deterrence with escalation control. Washington must assess whether the strikes altered Iran's timeline in a meaningful way, or simply disrupted it temporarily. If disruption is temporary, additional measures may be debated internally. If disruption is substantial, diplomatic leverage may increase. At the same time, American policymakers must weigh broader regional stability. Escalation carries military risk. Escalation carries economic risk. Escalation carries diplomatic cost. And in an environment already shaped by global competition, policymakers must consider how adversaries and partners interpret each move. For Israel, the calculus may be even more direct. Israeli security doctrine has historically emphasized prevention over reaction when it comes to perceived existential threats. If uncertainty remains high, Israeli planners may prioritize intelligence clarity before declaring strategic success. For Israel, ambiguity surrounding uranium stockpiles may be viewed not as stabilization, but as unfinished business. That does not automatically imply further action, but it does mean verification remains central. Meanwhile, Gulf states are watching developments carefully. Any prolonged instability could impact shipping lanes, energy infrastructure, and investor confidence. Oil markets respond quickly to geopolitical uncertainty, sometimes faster than diplomatic developments can stabilize them. Even limited speculation can create volatility, and sustained volatility affects global inflation, trade costs, and domestic political pressures worldwide. This economic layer adds urgency to quiet diplomatic engagement. China and Russia are also calculating. China's energy dependence on Middle Eastern supply routes makes regional stability strategically important. Beijing generally favors predictability in energy flows and diplomatic resolution over prolonged confrontation. Russia's position is more complex. Moscow maintains relationships across the region and may analyze whether instability shifts diplomatic leverage. At the same time, uncontrolled escalation introduces uncertainty that few major powers prefer. None of these actors are passive observers. Each is assessing how the balance of power may shift depending on whether Iran's nuclear material was neutralized or merely obscured. Behind the scenes, intelligence competition may now intensify. Cyber monitoring, signal interception, surveillance of transport networks, financial transaction tracking, all may increase in priority. The visible phase of the crisis may slow. The invisible phase may accelerate. And this phase is less dramatic, but often more decisive. Because confirmation of material status, even partial confirmation, will shape diplomatic posture moving forward. There is also a psychological dimension. Military strikes send signals. Silence sends signals. Ambiguity sends signals. If Iran believes deterrence remains credible, its strategic posture may reflect resilience. If Iran believes vulnerability has increased, its calculations may shift. Similarly, if Washington or Jerusalem believe ambiguity favors caution, diplomacy may expand. If ambiguity favors urgency, pressure may intensify. Strategic behavior often hinges not on certainty, but on perceived risk. At this moment, the central question remains unresolved. Has Iran's enriched uranium stockpile been fully neutralized? Or does significant material remain beyond public visibility? There is no independent confirmation offering a definitive answer. Investigations continue, assessments evolve. Diplomatic channels reportedly remain active, and intelligence agencies are working to reduce uncertainty before policy moves too quickly in one direction. Because history shows that crises often escalate not from intention, but from miscalculation under incomplete information. The strikes may have altered physical infrastructure, but the strategic outcome depends on verification. Until clarity emerges, governments will proceed cautiously, balancing deterrence, diplomacy, intelligence gathering, and economic stability. The visible phase of the crisis may be over. The strategic phase is only beginning.